All right, how are you doing, Westchester? This is Ryan, your host of the Westchester Informed podcast. I'm here today, Wednesday, the 26th. We had a village meeting last night around 7. I think it lasted, what, Tracy, till about 8:30, 8:15?
Yeah, 8:30.
Okay. Well, I'm here with Tracy Markey. She is one of our trustees. Some of you may or may not know her or of her. So, as usual form for these type of podcasts with the trustees, I'd like to at least get to know her and find out a little bit more about how she came to be a trustee. And let's just start there.
Okay.
So, you've lived in Westchester how long?
I'm a lifer.
Are you? Okay. This is a theme.
My kids are a fourth generation. So my mom grew up in the house that I grew up in since she was 7. So both sets of my parents grew up in Westchester. My grandparents lived in Westchester, did not grow up in Westchester. So I've been here my entire life, 51 years. And I was involved in a little bit, I wouldn't say politics, but I guess it was because I was part of the moms who helped pass the referendum for the school district to save the arts. We were told about that referendum, I think it was 3 months before the vote. And as 7 moms, we got together in our friend's kitchen and ran it out, and we're told that it would never pass on the first time, and we passed through on the first time. Just stomping the pavement and doing what it is. You're passionate in something, make sure you get it done. I said, just don't get 7 angry moms that they want to take away the arts in your kids' school. Tell them that at the last minute, you're going to get something done.
Yeah. Was that primary or intermediate?
It was all
of the schools. We're getting rid of arts.
We're getting rid of the arts. That's music, art, anything, the chorus, all the plays. They were going to get rid of it.
Okay.
And with that money, we also were able to, with that referendum, we were able to get air conditioning in the middle school.
Okay.
So.
How long ago was this?
6 years ago, 7 years ago.
Okay.
Maybe that long.
So what was that process like? I mean, I think people would be interested to hear that you started out not as a trustee, but just getting, this is sort of, and I've always said I'm not gonna run for office or anything, but I've just now gotten interested enough to pay attention, and the intention, obviously, we've said it a number of times, was back in October, was to start a podcast that would be something for the residents, where I could go around to the school boards and the different people and try to give both them a voice, but just to sit down and have civil conversation where they were able to be asked the stupid questions as well as the smart ones to see where some of these issues lie. And so what was that like for you, at least in coming out and seeing that happen and go, we got to do something about this? So walk me through that.
We're an arts family. My son plays guitar. My daughter was in the dances and stuff. So, and it's something I think is very, I don't know how to say, it's very good for the kids to learn. I mean, if you take that out of their school, and like kids learn with music. My son listens to music. I mean, and it's opera music when he studies. He'll listen to classical. It all helps the children learn. And to take that out of school, I thought would be a disaster, especially since we have such a fantastic music and arts program at our schools. And growing up in Westchester, that was a big part of ours, going to school there too. So when we found out about it, we were just like, we have to do something. We need to save the arts. We want it done. 3-4 of the moms that we were with were teachers, so they knew how it affected the kids in school. And we just we put up a GoFundMe page because we didn't have any money to do flyers and the signs and everything. And we didn't use any mailers. We just had our kids. We ran off copies, sat at home, folded them, and went to everybody's door, posted it on Facebook, and just hit it out there. And
what were you looking for? I mean, what were the numbers behind that? You were trying to...
Well, the other thing that I think that helped us too, let me back up, is that we were able to put a calculator on the school's website, because a lot of the seniors were worried and a lot of the lower income were worried that it was going to make it too expensive to where they can't stay here. We had a calculator in there where you punch in your mortgage or how much you owe or what your value is, and it'll tell you how much it would raise. And most of them didn't raise, that were concerned. The ones that were not concerned may have raised a little bit, but they were okay with it. They wanted it to go through, so that helped us a lot.
So that was the core of my question. Is so you actually went through property tax referendum, like
Yes,
the referendum was to
it
raise property taxes.
Yes. I don't know how much it was.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So that was my first dabble in politics.
Yeah.
I'll always say I'm not a politician. I'm just a resident, and I like to see what happens in my town.
Yeah. For the more analytical of the bunch, and I can see this being a question, is where are we? Last night they spoke, or Paul spoke a little bit about the PTEL or something like that, like what we couldn't go over. I mean, they looked to pass an ordinance that would trigger the referendum again to repeal home rule if it were passed and the property taxes were raised above a certain amount. And that includes, I'm even dumb to these things, but like CPI and PTEL, which is actually a percentage of value, I guess, or of the home's values.
So it would be, I'm not exactly sure on that. I know it's 5% or CPI or less. So if it goes
the lesser of the two.
Yes, the lesser of the two. So if it goes above that, then it would get thrown back onto the ballot.
Right.
As a referendum to vote it.
No, and that's the number, like when I looked at the taxes just from a resident who knows nothing and trying to search for what our sort of effective tax rate is, it seems like we fall in the last 3 to 5 years, we've fallen between like 9 and 10% or a little over 10% in terms of, if somebody looks to say like, well, who's paying a higher effective tax rate than us? And some of those are home rule communities, some of them are not. And some of them in higher income or higher home value areas are obviously could probably operate with 7 to 8% taxes because of the amount of taxes they're paying. Who knows, if that really, I mean, when you have a school and you have a budget, like one school that holds a certain amount of kids in an area where the tax rate produces a certain income, you know what I'm saying? They have more to do. They have more money to work with the same size school possibly. It's like Hinsdale or places like this might have the same amount of kids or the same size buildings and things like that, but they just have a higher amount of money to deal with these kind of things. And so anyway, we kind of got off topic there, but I just so you deal with this referendum and you get it passed.
You get it passed.
First shot.
First shot.
Okay.
Everybody was shocked.
And this was a vote by the residents.
This was a vote by the residents. Yes.
Okay.
So this was just, like I said, just 6-7 moms that just went through and got it done. We were told by the superintendent at that time, he's like, "You're never going to get it done. It never passes the first time." And we got it, and he was shocked. And so everything was good with that, and I was so happy that passed. And I've always paid attention to what's going on in town. Not that close. I had to deal with the illness myself. Younger kids, you get busy, you kind of fall off the radar of everything.
Yeah.
Both of my kids are in high school now. I'm paying more attention to what's going on now. And then came to a couple board meetings, and I was like, wow. I'm like, things need to change, and I'm one, if you want something changed, you better do something yourself. Yeah.
And Kathy alluded to this a little bit, but just, I guess in the best way possible, could you explain what you saw happening that you felt the changes needed to take place?
Well, I've seen it all along. I mean, living in Westchester my entire life, it's always been run the same way. And it seems like everybody is scared for change. Nobody wants change. It's always been status quo, always run the same way. But when I came in, the village manager that we had just really did not seem to know exactly what was going on. The finances were a mess. And it just didn't seem that anything was really getting done. So I'm like, it didn't seem like it was being run like a business, which it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, if this stuff would have happened at my business, fired years ago.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. Yeah. So I just kept sitting back there. I'm like, gosh, it has to be run like a business. It is a business. It needs to be run like that. You can't be willy-nilly about all these issues. This is a town. You have to make decisions, firm decisions, good decisions about how your town is going to be run. And it just wasn't going. So I'm like, you know what?
Yeah. And it only takes continuously since 2009 when I've lived here, and we always consistently hear people say that they love Westchester, that they've had a connection to Westchester in some way over the years. And so it only takes a few loud folks that things are a mess to kind of sort of create a reputation. And so I didn't hear it, but I'm starting to realize now how quickly that could have happened over the long term if it hadn't been sort of cut off at a certain point or dealt with at a certain point. So it feels, and I could be totally wrong about this, but it feels as though someone stepped in and started to try to, at least from my conversations with the trustees, it seems like you guys stepped in to say, okay, this has to change. What made you feel like you've been in this position for this long now? What do you think is having the most impact, like from the changes that you think needed to happen?
I think having the budget balanced is huge. First of all, we have a surplus, which we haven't seen in years. We have a fantastic village manager who is looking to improve so many things in town. Whereas you look at the other village manager and it just wasn't there. I feel like he is, and he's looking out for the better of the town. Having a new police chief, I think, is another great change. They have the front office in line now. It was kind of, I don't know how to say it, thrown off. Not managed that well. Well, not managed that well. They have great people up in the front office, but if you don't have a great manager, it's not going to work.
Yeah. And I've been in some towns that, man, I like, I don't know if they were home rule or not. I'd have to look it up, but you address the front office for needs that you have as a resident, or in my case, quote unquote resident, because I'm flipping a house or I'm rehabbing a house, but there was this sort of attitude or sort of vibe that came from, like you're the government that's supposed to be supporting the residents or at least working for them, and there was just this attitude, like it was just like, this is the way it is, take it or leave it, like it or not, we're not answering your questions, this is, you should know better. That whole vibe comes from some of the villages that I've had to deal with, and a lot of, I talk around to people and different people I come across, attorneys and such, that deal also with villages, and some of them have said, well, they deal with a lot of crazy residents, all day, and not everybody's going to come in there with some, reasonable, critically thinking, questions, and then when, so yeah, it's easy for those people to have. But I don't know, I've seen the change, just to give you that idea. I mean, I've seen some of the change just in Westchester, and it's been nice to know that they're willing to answer questions, they're willing to help out, and that's going to take a certain person, not necessarily just a certain village. It's going to take a certain person in that role that can handle the pressure, that can handle the tough questions, and not be rude or not be, because it affects everybody, I think. And so, and that seems to be a theme with most of the trustees, is that the things that have changed seem to be organizational and budget, and just the fact that you can see more. It's almost like you've emptied your pockets and are now able to see what's on the table, where it's going, how things are, and then, so with that analogy, and I don't want to put, an idea in your head or words in your mouth, but like, would you say then that's the idea behind home rule that you guys came up with, is now that the chips are on the table, we have to be able to move them around? Or do you think that that's really something that you haven't really quite figured out yet? I mean, let me make it clearer. So last night, Paul proposed the idea that the water ordinance change from, well, I don't know if I should talk about that. I mean, it's in the village.
It's in the
Yeah.
village.
So anyway, he wanted to change the water ordinance,
Mhm.
right? So if that's possible, to charge more for shutting off and turning on your water when you don't pay your bill, I get the theory behind that. The psychology behind that is that for a higher fine, I mean, like if you're caught on your cell phone or if you're caught in an accident that you've been on your cell phone, I think that fine should be astronomical.
Oh yeah.
Because then people really won't do it because they'll understand the risk is they literally will be lose their license for a year, and that would be, detrimental to their income and everything else. So I get the psychology behind it, but you know, if that's possible, then what else is possible that we're doing to sort of fix things that we don't need home rule for? Does that make sense? Because I think that's
It
just
does.
it's just a resident question I think a lot of people would have is
If we can
why
go
now
through this
and
with,
why do we have to do it if some of these things that most people don't know about because they're not either coming to the meeting or maybe they're not paying attention, some of the things that we're doing around fees and permitting and fines and this kind of thing might help the situation with the budget, create an even bigger surplus.
I think local issues like the water can be handled here at the local level. I know some of the other trustees that you spoke with talked about the vicious dog bite. That's something that if we, I know was said before, had home rule, we could have handled it
Yeah.
with much stiffer fines than that, because that goes on to the county. We have to work with the county on that, Cook County. I'm not exactly sure on what ordinances we can pass here locally without home rule, and which ones would be easier to go through with home rule. I know that they're with home rule. I mean, obviously we can tax the gaming.
Yeah.
I said it right.
Gambling.
Gambling.
Just say
The
gambling. Gaming.
The
is,
gambling.
Yeah.
I was trying to get it right first. The gambling.
No, yeah.
The liquor, the alcohol,
Yeah.
the cigarettes, and all that stuff, and the fines and the fees.
Mhm.
So, and people have been complaining also about having cars fly down. I mean, you see it on people's Ring doorbells flying down Balmoral.
Mhm.
Why can we stop that? We've had issues with cars coming out of the cemetery off of Manheim when big funerals are held over there, and they cut through Dickens. And there's a lot of kids on there, so they cut through there instead of. So with that, with having home rule, we can set a cop there and nail these guys with sky high tickets that are blowing through the stop signs, flying down the streets. You start getting people. It'll just be safer too with cars not flying down the streets.
Yeah.
I find that all the time. I'm one of those loudmouth moms that screams, "Slow
Yeah,
down!"
yeah,
in the
yeah.
summertime when cars go flying down the streets. It's a residential town.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be flying down there. But with home rule, we could give stiffer fines and fees for that. That would help us.
So beyond what we're able to do, because
Yeah.
the ignorant person in me wants to say, well, why can't we monitor that stuff now and give out the tickets we can, but yet
We can,
Yeah.
but we have to go through Maybrook to do court. If we're home rule, we can hold court here, which we lose having to pay Maybrook
okay,
money to
Yeah.
hold court over there, where we can hold it here
Okay.
and have our own adjudication here.
and Paul mentioned last night that we're actually prepared to do adjudication here. So
Yes. So
maybe-
that would help us immensely, I think,
Yeah.
with having a safer town, having less people blow stop signs, getting more revenue in
Yeah.
from that. So yeah, so that's what I questioned that when I first got on too. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Because we have to pay so much. By the time we went to Maybrook, I don't know these numbers, but it's something ridiculous of what we would get. So we would be able to raise the fines on those types of tickets.
So have you guys? One of the big things, at least just last night, that somebody brought up was the idea that the numbers aren't being presented necessarily. It seemed to me that there really wasn't a whole lot of. It didn't feel like there was a lot of knowledge about what these numbers actually are when you say we need to fix streets and alleys or streets and sanitation and things like that. So if you're talking about millions, then there's no way to fill that with, a red light camera that produces 300,000 or 1%, even a 1% sales tax may not even touch quite what is needed if the projects are large enough. You know what I mean?
Right.
Is that a valid? Is it valid to say, well, how could you avoid property tax if that's really the one thing that will probably get you? So two things: either raise the money that you need to, or raise the debt that we need to do those projects. And one guy mentioned on future income, we don't really know or aren't getting fed numbers as to what that would generate.
Right.
So
Well, I know for the first part, I know Paul Nosek is working on getting numbers so that we can show the residents what we are looking for, what we're going to fill. To fix the alleys in the streets, yeah, it's millions of dollars that it would cost. But the last thing we want to do is to raise the property taxes. Nobody wants to see that happen. So we believe that the easiest way would be the home rule with the taxes, like I had said, the fines and the fees. And then also it will help us with the TIF district once that's developed. I know it's a couple years down the road, but any major project of repairing sewers and streets is going to take a while. It's unfortunately not going to happen overnight. I wish it would.
Yeah.
But
is that something that, and you may not know the answer to this, I'm definitely trying to get in front of the Economic Development Committee and some other people that I need to. But I'm not under the complete understanding that the TIF district would be the one that benefits from any of those taxes, or would the entire village? Because it was my understanding that the district itself, the TIF district you create, would have to be the beneficiary of any collected taxes above and beyond the TIF freeze. So those could be used for infrastructure or to pay down costs associated with the creation of the TIF. But then that TIF, once it's closed out, would generate those revenues.
Correct.
Okay, so the idea would be to pump that money that comes into that sort of slush fund in a way from the frozen taxes, to put that money right back in to either whatever debt or whatever deal was created for that, so that it clears up. And then we can start to see that revenue.
Yeah.
Developers, just being part of that world, it takes a long time, but developers are also going to want the longest and best benefit they can get. And 23 years or something like that is what the idea is in terms of TIF. So I don't know. I just, like, my concern would be how are we negotiating that? And I think that's a big part of bringing in retail here. Because then when you see that the taxes that we already have in place, instead of home rule and raising the taxes that currently exist, whether they be through, Mariano's and Jewel and all the other places we have in town, you're creating more retail, thus creating more sales tax revenue without even having to increase the tax revenue on the things that we have currently. And I don't know whether that would mean that more gambling places go in, or more liquor stores, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, some people are concerned, well, there's more there. If you raise it on the devices, then it's easy to say that maybe some of the vices should go into the new retail spaces too. And they're probably inevitably going to.
Right.
But
yeah,
there's no
right.
Look, I have to let you off the hook, because none of this stuff is easy. None of this stuff is like, oh yeah, we just do that. And I've said it so many times, and I said it again last night in front of everyone, that we're not. I don't feel. One of the reasons why I feel like this is a good and bad time to have started something like this is that I'm just somebody who takes a lot of ownership of and responsibility of my actions. Like, if we're taking as much responsibility as we can for how we operate as a village personally, then we come together. You see a collective responsibility, right? So anybody and everybody who questions whether or not the village is doing the right thing, like, well, if we turn that around and look at your personal finances and the way that you operate your household, we're like you said, we're a big business. We're like, the village itself should be considered, I don't know if it's the best analogy, but like a big household, and we all have a part in that. So it's tough not to continue to have that come back in my head, like, well, if we're really calling the board to the rug on this stuff, do we have a part in that? Do we have a hand in that? And so one of the things I said last night was, why not, if you are a home rule community, could you still not go to referendum? And whether that referendum is for the streets, whether it's for, whatever it's for.
And I don't think that they ever really answered you on that.
Yeah, kind of. You can go to referendum for a home rule, but the one gentleman before me had said, what if there were some sort of catastrophe? And I get that
Right.
that's something to consider is catastrophe, but, if the people that are asking for home rule currently want to have that because of certain specific things that they can move around to create a better situation overall, would it then make sense to just go to referendum for the things that you need because it sort of appeases both sides of it? Like, well, look, we're going to ask you.
I feel like you're going to be nickel and dimed. We need this. We're going to go to referendum again. We need this fixed. We have to go to referendum again.
But the referendum's got to be. I would think it would be held to the big items. I mean, if you're asking if you're asking for us to add more debt, we go to referendum for that. And if they don't want to do it, then guess what? Everyone needs to look around and quit complaining about your alley, because if we didn't get together and we didn't have these conversations, then we're not going to know the reason. We're not going to know where the real problems lie. Especially with myself, I looked at it and went, wait a minute. How much do I really know about what the big ticket items are? How much do I can sit there at a village board meeting and say, oh, well, he just said there was a surplus. And he just said that the Public Works just handled 4 water main breaks and got their cold patching done. What's the problem? But that doesn't even scratch the surface probably when you look at what needs done for long-term projects and the millions that they cost. What does that really mean for the village? And it's, again, the analogy of owning a car. If you continue to put off the brakes and the oil changes and I actually just had the transmission fluid changed on my wife's car because I thought, well, I'm just going to get on it now because that, in fact, is the problem my car is having, is it's slipping transmission. Well, I was able to fix it in a way that was sort of a Band-Aid, but I'm kicking myself because I've owned the car for 8 years and never done that.
Mechanics always have the worst cars.
Yeah. So it's like...
But there's so many big projects. Like Paul had mentioned last night, that there's 2 bridges in town, one on the north side that goes underneath Salt Creek, I believe it is. That's crumbling. That needs to be fixed. That's a big ticket item. And then there's the other bridge over the old school on the Nixon side, the middle school side.
Yeah.
That needs to be fixed too. So there's 2 big ticket items there also. And there are so many streets, so many alleys that need to be fixed. I know my aunt lived on the north side, and even back then the alleys were bad. And quite honestly, I don't know if they've been fixed since then, and that's 30 some odd years.
Yeah.
So it's either, and everybody will complain that they don't want their taxes raised, but they want everything fixed. Well, you have to give somewhere.
Yeah.
We're not a bank. We don't make the money. It has to come from somewhere. And I wish residents would realize that we have to do something in order to fix it. And I know when Paul spoke with you, we're not going to go under. But to have the TIF and the ability to get out from underneath Springfield's thumb of how Springfield's run more on our own instead of how Springfield wants us to run. We have that ability being home rule to do that.
I get that. I get that idea of. I get that argument, but I just don't understand. Like, I think a lot of people look at it like, well, why would then the idea be that it's the towns and the people they elect that are running amok with home rule? I mean, is that really the gentleman that's going to come in? I don't know, I forget his name, but he's going to come in, the longest running mayor, and talk to us on Sunday, right? Sunday?
Yes, Jeff.
Yeah. So I encourage, while I have a chance, I encourage everyone to come on Sunday, and it's at 1:30, and listen to what he has to say. I don't care what side of the issue you're on. I think it would be interesting and it would be knowledgeable for us to find out how home rule villages operate and how they do it and how non-home rule. What are when you're looking at the pros and cons? I think you have to look at that because you say that we're under sort of the management or whatever of the state, and that's why home rule. When you look back at the history, that's why home rule was even put in place or given an option. But I guess it does like then. In your opinion, do you think that that's probably why home rule gets out of hand? I mean, is that really is it really that easy that home rule gets out of hand because people figure, well,
I don't know if it really gets out of hand. I mean, I look at the towns surrounding us and I see them flourishing under home rules. Home rule.
Yeah.
Look at Hillside.
Yeah.
They've got that great shopping center, Broadview.
Well, I mean, for every example, though, there's going to be this example of like debt run amok and
I haven't heard anything.
Overfeeing of residents where they're, now they've got 6 different fees and things they have to keep up with that rather than, sure, they're not raising the property taxes, but they're,
I'm sure if you dig into it, you can find, people that, obviously there's people out there that don't want home rule, but and for us right now and the trustees on the board, therefore, we just feel it's the right thing right now, and I think we have the right board for it now.
Okay, so we're running on a surplus, and the first thing that you think will be done will be taxes on vices. Like, what would be the first thing that you guys look to? Would you look to, issuing bonds for debt because of the interest rates, or would you
being new in this? I mean,
yeah,
I kind of take the lead of
yeah.
Frank and Paul and Nick, and Angelo being the older, more have been seated on the board the longest.
Yeah.
But I would like to implement, taxes on the gambling, the cigarettes, especially the e-cigarettes.
I guess that's why I appreciate Paul in some ways, because he was willing to say, but that's not really going to make a dent in what we're talking about in terms of streets and sanitation and bridges and things like that. Like, that's really not going to make a huge impact there. I mean, it'll make an impact in, general fund operating.
And with the fees and fines.
But that might only make, and that's what my concern last night was, well, that might only make the impact enough to cover the red light camera issue, because it doesn't seem like that's something we need to be keeping.
Right.
I mean, I don't know why.
I'd like to see the chief's, what he finds out from
accident reports and
stuff, looking at that,
looking at
to
the
see if they are
that.
still holding back on accidents and or if it's just a revenue forcing.
But the problem is it's like 7 or 8 years now of that revenue. It's kind of like village stickers. I mean, you're not just going to dump that because it's something that people are used to, but I didn't even realize is actually doing something within the village, just maybe not in areas where we all feel it, So there are areas where a village sticker does make a difference for people on what streets they park on and when.
Exactly.
So,
village stickers have been around forever. I remember growing
yeah,
up.
No, I know, there's a lot of villages that don't have them, but they have. This is the other thing that I think. I don't know. I mean, it's not an easy answer, this home rule thing, but I think that's what the intention. Let's say in a perfect world, the village trustees and the people running the villages all had great minds for this thing and all had the best intentions. That's, I think, what home rule was looked at first was, well, Westmont or Downers Grove or any of these villages are going to have different situations, and most of them have a better retail situation than us.
Right.
So that's my only concern is how much different are we in that regard, that the TIF might help out, but would it appease people to sit back and say, hold on, let's not go home rule yet. Let's give you guys a chance to work through the TIF thing. Let's see how much the retail can change us while we're still operating in a surplus. And then let's see how the TIF changes the village in any way, or it just didn't feel like there was something that was, emergency. It didn't feel like there was something that was going to come up, soon. and how soon? And these are the things I think people are getting frustrated with. And it's not on you. It's just I'm expressing, I think, what I hope to be some of people's frustration is just not knowing, not understanding what is it that you're seeing that you need money for, and how much, and where would that money come from given home rule. And I think it's still a concerningly valid question. After last night, I was kind of like left more confused because I sit with Paul and he says things are good. We're not in any trouble. But that begs the question then, where would the village see itself getting better, and what would that take? Would it take debt or would it take income, and where's that going to come from? And so yeah, I don't know. That's just, these are the difficult things that I think you're trying to also understand. And mostly, just getting your reaction to going from successfully pulling off a referendum that you cared about, and now you're in this. You're in the deep end. I feel like.
Yeah, it is. It's what I expected, but not what I expected. If that makes any sense. I wish I could do it full time. I'd love to, sit here and be able to spend 100% of my day doing it, because there's plenty of stuff that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not a full-time job, but it is very fulfilling, very rewarding.
Yeah.
Even though, you get some naysayers that can get you down, but I look around and I see great things that have happened in the last 6 to 8 months. Since I've been on the board, a lot more transparency. I mean, it's just, I'm an open book. You ask me, I'll tell you.
Have you guys had any talks like about just the idea that you guys care? I'm kind of like that myself. Like I see that I want to believe in you guys because it seems like you all live here. You all have mentioned a lot of different things. Like, well, even I heard it last night. It would sort of be making a mockery of what we're trying to do, that we live here, and then we would destroy some of the trust in taxes and this kind of thing just because of having the power to do it. And I agree that would be kind of a silly thing, but at the same time, have you guys ever gotten together and said, you know what, then we'll just do it without home rule. Like let's just do it through referendum, and we'll let the frustrated side of me would be like, all right, fine. We'll do it through referendum. And
I personally, and this sounds bad because of the referendum that I was on before, but I don't think that the tax referendum would pass. I think that would be harder to pass. That's just my own personal thought.
Yeah. Can you pass? And then here's the other thing: can you pass a referendum to get what we need when you're under non-home rule? Like, is there a limit? I didn't hear numbers that sounded like I didn't hear numbers that sounded like a limit that we were even exceeding in terms of property taxes, but I don't know.
That I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really is. Maybe Paul understands it more, but that was one of the things I kept pondering is, well, it would seem like a pretty good challenge to say, okay, well, we are going to inform you and ask you for what we need, but laying out the case for a referendum would almost be similar to laying out a case for home rule at this point, because you're trying to accomplish the same things, but just asking the residents directly for it.
And because we've heard a lot from the residents about the water bill, always getting the little add-ons to the water bill, and it gets more expensive and more expensive and more expensive.
Yeah.
So we don't want to keep on adding little $5-10 onto your water bill each time. Yeah. So that's what the home rule would help us, so that we didn't have to do that, to help out with the sewers infrastructure and getting all of that in. Yeah. But we did hear a lot of residents complain about the water bill going up higher, and residents coming in, and you feel bad for them. They're a single parent, and they work 3 jobs, and to keep it, and the water bill's the highest thing, and that's the last thing to be paid, and you're like, your heart bleeds for them.
Oh, sure.
And you wanna help them, and the last thing you want to do is. hit them with another fine. You're like,
I know.
and
That's what would get frustrating for me is just knowing that I couldn't do anything with the macroeconomics of it. Like,
right.
Your gallon of milk is costing more,
Exactly.
and that's not, you want a scapegoat, but at the same time, it can't.
I guess that's why I'm not a politician because not that politicians don't have hearts, but I feel I would go and help the person. I mean, I'd be living, with nothing to give somebody else. That's just how I am. But I mean, it's hard to hear residents that struggle like that, and you don't want to hit them with another raise and a fine.
Yeah, some of it I feel is just so, like, the macroeconomics of it show that things are going to be more costly the more time goes on. So whether that means that we have to raise taxes to afford the things that used to cost less to fix and that kind of thing, like it's all one big issue, and it's happening personally, and it's happening on a level of the village, and then it's probably happening, obviously. Our state has a lot of corruption, so if it were perfect, in a perfect world though, I would think that it's still going to happen on a state level. They're going to say, hey, things just in general are costing more, the whole idea of inflation or different things affecting the economics of things. But it's hard. This is why I also would never be a politician, really, because the idea, it seems to me, is take what you need, tax as you need, and then hope the residents understand what you're doing and will eventually get over it.
Right.
Instead of ask them for it and, hope that they understand it enough to give it to us. Because it has to seem or feel like most people don't or aren't willing. Now that I'm sort of deep in this, it seems like a lot of people, they want the questions answered, but there's not a whole lot of personal responsibility for finding out those answers and understanding it, because you got a job and you got kids and you've got, free time and vacations you want to take, and you've got all this stuff going on in your life. And I don't know, sometimes I feel like it's the role of our leaders or government to just say, sorry, we're going to have more money to do the things, to keep the comfortable lifestyle that you live, where you can, this town is very safe and it's nice to,
That's why I think a lot of people stay here. I mean, it's a good little safe town.
Yeah.
I mean that's what keeps me. I mean, my kids can go anywhere, and I know that they know any house that they could go to would be fine if something were to happen.
Yeah.
It's that nice safety. And like you said, if we want to keep it that way, though, we're gonna,
That, you see what I mean, though? I'm getting at, it's hard to just. I think people want there to be this idea that, well, without home rule, we just go to referendum or just ask us if you need it. But it's harder to ask and then turn around and say, see, our town is full of crappy streets and falling bridges, and how much of a liability could that become? And you can't point that out in hindsight and then say, well, we asked you 3 years ago for the referendum that you wouldn't pass, and now here we are. But with home rule, it almost seems like, well, then it just has to happen, and you hope that everybody can kind of get over it enough to see the changes, right? I mean, I don't know. It's a bad way to put it, but I mean, it kind of feels like that in terms of the state and nationally too. It's just like taxes never go down, and people always complain about that. But it's like, well, that's sort of the system that we're in. Is they take what they need, or they tax you as they need. I mean, the fact that we just had vehicle registrations go from $100 to $150. I mean, just take what we need. And even with all the corruption, I guess that's what I'm getting at too, is just even with all the mismanagement, it's just take what we need, and you'll eventually either see a benefit or not see a benefit. And it's a revolving door for the politicians. And okay, here's the question. Let me put it to a question.
Is away from
how do we avoid that?
Right.
Like, that's the question.
I think we're on the right track.
Okay.
I hate to say it, but it goes back to the good old boy. Get in there and break that up and start running things the right way, instead of doing a favor for so and so and doing this. And people, I've seen things on Facebook. Oh, what are you getting in return? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
I'm like, we don't get anything. I don't know what they're thinking we're getting anything in return, because there's nothing other than knowing that we're helping the residents. But we want to get rid of that mentality of, the good old boy network of favor for favor and like that, and running on a straight, honest line.
Yeah.
Doing the right thing for the right reason and doing the right way.
Do you think it's an Illinois thing then? I mean, do we just so distrusting of our politicians that?
I think so, I think so. There's more people moving out of Illinois, nowadays to go just to Indiana or Wisconsin. I don't think people trust the politicians in Illinois just because of the history and the background that it has. And I did see something on the news the other day that it's the lower half of one of the most trusted states. So it's hard. But I'd love to put a bubble around Westchester. Like,
yeah, it's hard.
Not
it's
us,
hard to see that. Yeah, it's hard to see that.
We're still a good little town here.
Sure.
We're not that corrupt and we're not crooked
And that's the idea too. I think at some point, and this doesn't have anything to do with whether or not I'm for or against home rule. I think at some point you have to trust the people that you put into office, and you saw something and decided to run and won. So I mean,
and that's what I think. I think right. People say, well, why are you doing it now? I think we have the right. I know we have the right board now. We have the right board that are thinking for the residents, for the town, not for themselves. Not that anybody else was, for themselves before. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah.
But the board that we have now is very like-minded for looking out for the residents in the town and making it a fantastic place to be.
Tough question then, though. So what do you think it will be the first impactful thing that people will talk about if you were given home rule and you started with some of the things that you wanted to do? What would be the first thing people would be like, wow, home rule really did this for us? Like, do you have one, or is it?
We can start with the alleys on the north side. I mean, that's those poor people up there. I mean, they're awful. I would love to see the alleys and start on the streets. Get that done. That'd be
I would
check mark.
Okay,
number one.
yeah.
I mean,
yep. And I'm going to play devil's advocate there, because I would really like to see the numbers then on why that wouldn't mean debt that you would look to pay down as a no, like as a consequence of some of the home changes with home rule, being whether that being higher taxes, like Frank said, we're going to tax the things that we hope that some of that is coming from non-residents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great, but what dent will that put in the kind of debt we have to take in order to do that? Because those alleys, I mean, as Paul said, are like, it's like something like, I don't know what he said, 5 million. I hate to put too many words in his mouth, but
$1 million.
I think I'd have to go back to it. It'd be whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
It's a higher number than I think we could immediately, or even in the first year, expect to collect and then pay for, right? So,
right.
I mean, I don't know. I just feel like that's got to be part of the pitch, right? Is that we're gonna have to take some debt to be able to to make immediate changes that you're gonna see. But having the ability to shift things around, like with the hotel motel tax, and being able to move some of that money and different things, and having the manager we have now in place, maybe that means that he's able to keep an eye on things and run things better, where we can find better interest rates for that debt, and then in turn that pays it off faster. The TIF is continuing to move along. I mean, obviously there's got to be some sort of 2 to 5 year plan here that you guys have thought about, right?
I believe that they're working on is a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Positive.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that there's a lot of rumblings about wanting to see a plan, but that would be my only thing that over this course of this process has been that it seems quick, but that's why I dug into home rule, because I don't really know all the benefits or the things that you can get out of home rule that you can do. And do they just involve money, or do they involve, you know what I mean?
No, and that's the thing. I don't think it all involves money.
Yeah.
I think that, involves with how we can, like what Kathy said with the hotel motel, how we
Yeah.
can use that money somewhere else.
Yeah.
How we would be able to change certain ordinances easier than how we would have before.
Yeah, there's judiciary issues,
Yes.
and there's
So there's
issues for
that.
that.
And being new, I'm still learning more. I mean, each time you open it up, you learn more things and research more things.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's all about money.
Yeah.
A lot of people they hear it and they think, oh, more money, you're going to hit us for more money. They don't want to be hit for more money. And I said, well, then if you don't have, we don't want to raise the property taxes, but your other choice would be to go to referendum, where definitely you're getting higher property taxes. So we're trying.
Is that because of the state? I mean, you couldn't go to referendum for the tax on the things you want to tax during home rule? Yeah, maybe you could, but
yeah,
there might be state limits.
But if we don't do home rule, I mean, it would be the referendum, which would raise your taxes. And a lot of the people I hear, they're like, we don't want our taxes raised. We don't want home rule. Well, we don't want our taxes raised either.
Yeah.
But what Paul Gattuso was wanting to do was to go to referendum to raise the property taxes. And I don't know if all of the residents are aware of that either. He wanted to raise them right off the bat. We're trying to help the residents and not raise them to go home rule, to get it from other resources instead of hitting the resident. We feel like they've been hit enough lately, and it's just, we don't want to have ours raised. We don't want to raise our residents either. So try to do everything in our power that we can do not to do that, to get what we need done. Yeah. If it's going to be enough, I'm not a number person. That's more of a Kathy Forte there. I hate to say that, but sorry, Kath. She's a numbers person, but I mean, I would love to, see this pass and get going on the right road. Yeah, I wondered if that came up. You mentioned Paul and his idea of sort of not being for home rule, and I'm curious to sit down with him too, because it would be interesting to see how that conversation went. I mean, this came up as a solution, and it seems like most of the opposition is just simply about not being informed about what you plan to do with home rule. And like I said last night at the meeting when I stood up, I said, I've seen villages that have put together perfect presentations, talked about what they were going to do with the money. I think I put a video on there of Lyle. They seemed very well put together. I read an article that said they put out like 4 different flyers to residents throughout the entire process. I mean, you can be as prepared as you want, and nobody wants their taxes to go up. And even I would be in that boat. But again, we go back to the idea that, like, if we all need to get together as a village and say, well, some things need to change, how are we going to do that? And like you did with your referendum, how are we going to keep arts in our schools? I mean, if those things just continue to deteriorate, especially in schools. I mean, I was saying today to somebody that I think school teachers or schools, police and fire should be the highest paying jobs anywhere ever. And that's where our money should be going. And then there should be stringent rules as to how to maintain those jobs. I mean, if you made 6 figures as a teacher and had to maintain a certain, you know what I mean? If it wasn't, that gets into a whole rabbit hole of education. But I mean, if it weren't so mandated in terms of the things that you needed to do to be a good teacher or not. And some of that, when I say mandated, I see it because my wife's a teacher, that some of it is just produce the test scores, just pass kids. And it's like, well, some of the good teachers that you want around, you wish you could pay them what it takes to motivate that. And phone some of the good teachers and just keep on moving them through the grades. Yeah. And I don't know the whole story, of Westchester in terms of the school district and things like that. So again,
I didn't start this necessarily just to
Mhm.
talk about home rule, but it seems like the hottest topic, and it seems like the thing that will have the most immediate impact on some of these things. So I appreciate you sitting down with me and at least being open to having a conversation, getting asked the tough questions that we don't always know. And so I think one of the things that when I started this, I knew that this would happen. At least once I got into the talks with the trustees about home rule, is that you guys wouldn't always know. And I think I feel bad for people that I shouldn't say that. I empathize with the idea that people are demanding answers and they want answers. And you know, if there were time for it, I don't know when it was. You guys say it was started maybe October. If there were time for this whole thing to kind of work itself out and then come to referendum, people are saying November. Does anybody? Nobody's thinking about the fact that they're going to be so bombarded by national politics.
And
They're not
that's
even going to be
the reason why.
you know.
I mean, that's.
I mean, I wouldn't want to make that. I mean, you're coming in whether you like it or not, and this is just me and the psychology. You're coming in with a certain attitude to a national election, and so some of that might be
Anger.
Yeah. Some of it might be distrust.
You don't
some
want
of
to
it
run
might
a referendum on a big
you know,
national
yeah.
ticket. You know, that's just.
And you're giving the residents an extra thing to really think about and have to go through. I don't need a direct answer for this question, but I'm going to ask it. What would happen if the residents did say that? What if they said, you know what, put it on the November ballot because it will give us more time to understand what you're saying? Because I only bring that up because last night it kind of seemed like things are still figuring themselves out. And when called to question as to what the numbers are, what it's for, how much will really be raised, will it make a dent, or do we need to take on debt? I think there is a lot more of those kind of questions that could come out, and it might give us more of an opportunity to have an informed voter base rather than just a polarized voter base. Because you have the people on Facebook who are sort of, I call them the loudest minority only because you could probably count them. I mean, if you can't, you can't say that you're paying attention to 200 people talk about this on Facebook and consider that even remotely a informed voter base. You have 16,000 people or more in Westchester, and probably, what would you say, probably 6,000 to 7,000 of them can vote at least.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do we draw this out where we can actually have people? I guess you can't always get people to care. That's my naivete.
Right.
Why I'll never be a politician.
And if we brought it out earlier, I think we started talking about it in October, November.
Yeah.
We could have come to the meetings then. Granted, not everybody listens to the meeting, not everybody comes to the meeting, but then when we started talking about it,
yeah,
residents could have come to the meetings and brought it up. We did talk about it probably every other, it got hit on, very frequently.
But what does it take to bring awareness? Would it have taken a resident, or could you guys put out something? Like, I understood you guys can't put something out.
No.
I don't know how Lau got away with it then. Apparently
Right.
they put out pros and cons, or they put out some flyer.
I think it was the realtors put out
They did.
something.
I'm imagining something
Right.
that came
But we can't, no.
came out and said, we're considering home rule, join us in the conversation. You know what I mean? Something like that, where it's like, it goes out to every resident.
And then we ran through that and said, if we put it out too early, then they'll forget about it, and then it'll dwindle away and not have, as much attention on it, I guess.
Yeah.
As then, if you wait too long, then you've waited too long.
Yeah.
I
use the analogy.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, with my father-in-law, I use the analogy like, I give you a book, it could sit on your table for forever. Mm-hmm. But if you're motivated enough to go get the book, you're probably going to read it. And even if it sits there, you're probably going to see it and go, yeah, I really wanted to read that. So it's hard to induce people to care enough about this stuff to actually go out and get the information.
And that's the part, is to get them to care and ask us each side of where we're, last night was the first time we've had someone come to the board meeting to ask about home rule in quite a few meetings. And I honestly thought that there would have been more people.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're all available to talk to anybody. I mean,
Yeah.
I would prefer off of Facebook.
Yeah.
You can email me.
It has to be. That's why. That's why I
This
don't. You know, people get they get their own ideas, and I try to. I don't want to be hypocritical because I try to do this as much as I can in terms of being non-judgmental about the things that I see. But it's difficult. You know, you see somebody doing something and you wonder what their motives are. Especially in today's society, you're skeptical immediately, and it has. You know, for me at least, it felt like the reason to do this had little to do with ego or me as it did my own inability to understand drove me to say there has to be a way I would rather consume this information, and for me that's through conversation and through podcast. You know, I would rather listen to a podcast when I want, and if it were good conversation where people are talking, I disseminate that better. I understand it better. And yeah, you can give me something to read or you can give me a flyer or whatever, but I think that's been some of the frustrating part, at least because I don't have a lot of time. You guys don't have a lot of time, it seems like, to get the information out there, and then whether or not people care enough to look at it, and then that's where I empathize with you, because it has to be frustrating to say, well, we're just trying to do the best thing we can for the village, whether that means no or yes. You know, to be informed is better than not to be, but hopefully this helps. Like I said, it's such a tough issue. If you really want to get into it, it's such a tough thing to wrap your head around in terms of, yeah, there's this power that you'll have to do things, but that doesn't necessarily mean you want to use it. And what do you know, that then,
I wish everybody would believe us when we say we're not going to abuse it. It's the last thing we want to do.
Yeah.
The last thing we would do.
Yeah.
I just, I know you said it before.
But you have this golden thing, and you're not giving it up for nothing. No,
I'm
going Blagojevich on you. No, I'm just kidding.
But I just want the best for the village.
Yeah.
And, we're residents here too, and I know it sounds like a broken record, but we just want to do what's best for the town and best for the residents. And
well, that's a common theme, and we're going on an hour now, so I want to let you go. But yeah, that's definitely a common thing among all the trustees thus far, and it sounded like last night that one of the few that I haven't talked to. Who is it?
Angelo.
Yeah, Angelo. So that I'm sure I'm going to get the same thing probably from him, and so at least there's that, and at least that we've started down a road that will give people something to hear and gives people another source of something that they can disseminate this information.
And I
That's
urge
all we can
everybody
do.
to come on Sunday the 1st to ask questions, get answers. There was a young man there at the board meeting last night, 18 years old, and he's like, "What's this home rule about?"
Yeah.
I said, to come to the meeting on the 1st, fill you in.
Yeah.
I'm like someone young and eager to wanting to know more about it.
Yeah.
I said, I can send you a bunch of information and start reading on it. So
yeah.
I just urge people to come.
Because your vision has to also be passed on, and that's something I think that's critical too, is having a vision for where you wanted to take it, given these powers, and then where what that gets passed on to. There's going to be, I've said it before, such an importance on who we elect. If that were the case, that home rule passes, it's going to be who we elect, and not as much. I guess that's everything.
Right.
But all right, I appreciate it. Thank you. And again, I wanted to encourage people to go on to either Facebook or YouTube to catch these podcasts or to listen to them. Westchester Informed on Facebook and the same name on YouTube. You can subscribe. That's probably the best way to get these notifications that new ones are coming out. So I'll have this one as well as the village meeting from last night, the audio from that. So make sure you go on to Facebook or YouTube and try to get those. I am actually going to get something in the paper coming up, the newsletter. So there'll be a little something in the newsletter about this podcast as well. So hopefully it continues to grow. I'm Ryan Joseph on Facebook if anybody wants to interact with me. And you can also email westchesterilinformed@gmail.com, westchesterilinformed gmail. Any questions, concerns, people you want me to talk to, questions you want me to ask, I'm open to any of it and all of it, just because no matter what side you're on, I think it's important to find out as much information as you can, so we have an informed voter base. So I operate a real estate company. I'm self-sponsored at this point for this podcast. So my company's Pravda LLC. So we do home renovation and buying, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, as well as we do house flipping. We do home investing too. So until next time, thank you for listening. Appreciate it.